Let me describe Emily and Chris to you. They're both 32 years old, living in Austin, Texas. Emily's a project manager at a mid-sized tech company, making exactly $104,000 a year. Chris is a public school teacher, pulling in $58,000. Combined household income of $162,000. They should be the poster couple for financial success. They should be maxing out their retirement accounts and taking that annual European vacation without checking their credit card balance. They should be sleeping peacefully at night knowing they have 6 months of expenses safely tucked away. Instead, they're sitting at their kitchen table at 11 p.m. on a Tuesday, staring at a $1,900 transmission repair estimate for their 2016 Honda CR-V, genuinely wondering which credit card still has room on it. When their dishwasher started leaking last month, they didn't call a repair service. They put a towel down and hoped it would magically fix itself. The sinking feeling in Emily's chest when she sees unexpected expenses has become as familiar as her morning coffee routine. And the craziest part? They did everything right. They both earned bachelor's degrees from state schools to minimize debt. Emily avoided the expensive private universities her friends chose. Chris picked a stable, respectable profession that serves the community. They bought a modest 3-bedroom starter home in a decent school district for $489,000, not some glass condo downtown. They drive reliable used cars, cook dinner at home most nights, and contribute to their 401k plans like every financial advisor told them to do. Textbook responsible adults making what their parents would have called rich people money. So why does it feel like they're one flat tire away from financial catastrophe? Why does a 6-figure household income, a number that was once the gold standard of American prosperity, now feel like sophisticated poverty? Why are people like you, earning more than 70% of American households, constantly choosing between doing the responsible thing and actually being able to breathe for a second? Here's the uncomfortable truth we're going to unpack. Emily and Chris aren't failing the system. The system has quietly rewritten the rules of middle-class life, and nobody sent out a memo explaining why $100,000 became the new poverty line. My name is Barack, and I spend way too much time thinking about why people who follow every piece of conventional financial wisdom still end up trapped in a high-income hamster wheel. If you're someone who makes decent money but somehow never feels financially secure, or if you're tired of being told to skip lattes when your real problem is that housing costs tripled while wages went up 30%, make sure to hit that subscribe button and give this video a thumbs up if this helps you out. Because today, we aren't talking about budgeting apps or side hustles or cutting back on avocado toast. We're talking about why 6 figures became the new mathematical poverty line for the educated middle class, and how the system is designed to keep you running faster just to stay in place. Here's the thing about everything you've been told about money. For decades, the cultural mythology has been crystal clear. Hit 6 figures, and you've made it. That $100,000 salary is the finish line, the promised land. The point where money stress evaporates and financial freedom begins. Every career coach, every finance blog, every well-meaning relative has hammered home the same message. Focus on increasing your income, and once you break into that magical 6-figure territory, everything gets easier. It seems logical, right? $100,000 is nearly double the median household income in America. More money should mean more margin. Bigger paychecks should create bigger buffers. Our brains love these linear stories. Double the income, double the comfort. If you watched your parents stress over money at $40,000 a year, then $100,000 feels like invincibility. Except that's not what happened. People finally claw their way into the $90,000 to $130,000 range, and instead of breathing freely, they feel even more financially trapped. More obligations, higher bills, greater pressure. And the truly sick twist is that society tells them it must be their fault. You make six figures and you're still stressed about money? You must be terrible at budgeting. Here's the contrarian truth. For the modern middle class, $100,000 isn't a finish line. It's an entry fee into what I call the high-income poverty trap. The high-income poverty trap is the phenomenon where your salary qualifies you for every expensive adult obligation, but the underlying cost structure of middle-class life has been systematically repriced so that your extra income is already claimed before you even see it. You make enough to get approved for the mortgage, the car loans, the private school tuition, and the family health insurance plan, but not enough to actually afford them comfortably. This concept builds on research by economist William Baumol, who identified cost disease back in the 1960s, which basically means certain essential services get exponentially more expensive over time without getting proportionally better. According to data from the Bureau of Labor Statistics and Pew Research Center, since 1980, American worker productivity has increased by over 70%. But median wages have only grown by about 12% when adjusted for inflation. Meanwhile, the core costs of middle-class life, housing, healthcare, education, and childcare have exploded by 200 to 400%. Let that sink in. That's not personal failure. That's systematic financial engineering designed to extract maximum value from every income bracket. You're not bad with money. You're living in an economic equation that was deliberately rebalanced to keep you financially dependent regardless of how much you earn. Let me take you back to 1985 because understanding history is crucial to understanding why you feel financially insane despite doing everything right. In 1985, a household earning $100,000 wasn't just comfortable, it was genuinely wealthy. That income could buy a median-priced home for around $75,000, meaning housing consumed roughly 18% of gross income instead of today's 35 to 40%. The typical college-educated worker had a pension fully funded by their employer, not a 401k that required them to become amateur investment managers. Healthcare premiums were so low, they barely registered as a budget line item, averaging around 9% of household spending compared to today's 22%. And here's what most people don't realize about that era. The middle-class lifestyle everyone still pictures in their heads was built on one full-time income plus one full-time household manager. According to Federal Reserve historical data, families had structural slack built into their lives. They had a backup plan. If disaster struck, the stay-at-home parent could enter the workforce. If they wanted to cut expenses, someone was home to cook every meal, manage repairs, and eliminate the need for paid services. They had margin for error. They had flexibility. They had options. Now fast forward to today. That same $100,000 exists in a completely different economic reality. The median home price has increased by over 400% since 1985, while median wages have grown by only 77%. What used to cost 3 times your annual salary now costs 6 to 8 times your annual salary in major metropolitan areas. College tuition at public universities has exploded from around $1,200 annually to over $11,000, an increase of over 800% after adjusting for inflation. Full-time childcare, which barely existed as a market in 1985 because families had built-in childcare, now runs $15,000 to $30,000 per year per child in urban areas. But here's the crucial difference. We've burned our backup plan. Elizabeth Warren and Amelia Warren Tyagi documented this in The Two Income Trap back in 2003. What used to be an emergency option, sending the second parent to work, is now already deployed just to cover basic expenses. Modern families have no second gear to shift into when crisis hits. The raises that felt like progress over the past 2 decades were entirely absorbed by cost explosions in housing, healthcare, education, and childcare. Every dollar of income growth was instantly claimed by systematic price increases in the non-negotiable categories of middle-class existence. You're not imagining it. You really are working harder to afford less security than your parents had at equivalent income levels. Now you might be thinking, okay, costs went up, but $100,000 is still substantial money. Surely there's room to make it work if I'm disciplined enough. But let me walk you through the math of what happens to that six-figure salary in the real world. Let's use Emily and Chris as our example, with their combined household income of $162,000. Let's focus on what happens to that money before they make a single discretionary choice. First, taxes. Federal income tax. Texas has no state income tax, but they still pay Social Security and Medicare. For a married couple filing jointly with standard deduction, they're looking at roughly $28,000 in federal taxes and another $12,400 in payroll taxes. That's a combined tax burden of about $40,400. So their $162,000 immediately becomes $121,600 in actual take-home pay. But wait, there's more. They're responsible savers, so they contribute enough to their 401k plans to get their employer matches. Combined, that's about $13,000 annually. Their spendable income is now effectively $108,600, or roughly $9,050 per month. Housing comes next. Their mortgage on that $489,000 home, with 20% down and current interest rates around 7%, creates a monthly payment of approximately $3,000. Add property taxes of roughly $4,000 annually and homeowners insurance of $2,000 yearly, and their total housing cost hits $40,000 per year. Their monthly available cash drops from $9,050 to roughly $6,700. And we're not done. Childcare for their 18-month-old daughter runs $1,700 monthly at a decent daycare center in Austin. That's another $20,400 annually. Their available monthly cash falls to roughly $4,000. Health insurance premiums for family coverage through Emily's employer cost about $6,000 annually, and that's before they use it once. Between copays, prescriptions, and the occasional urgent care visit, healthcare easily consumes another $3,000 yearly. They're now down to roughly $3,250 monthly. Transportation for 2 working adults requires 2 cars. Even driving modest used vehicles, between car payments, insurance, gas, and maintenance, they're spending roughly $1,000 monthly or $12,000 annually. Available cash drops to roughly $2,250 per month. Student loan payments from their responsible state school educations still demand about $600 monthly combined. Food for a family of 3, even cooking at home most nights, runs about $800 monthly in today's inflated grocery market. Utilities, internet, phones, and basic insurance needs consume another $400 monthly. Let's add it up. $9,050 monthly take home minus $3,333 for housing, minus $1,700 for childcare, minus $750 for healthcare, minus $1,000 for transportation, minus $600 for student loans, minus $800 for food, minus $400 for utilities equals $467. That's not a typo. Emily and Chris, earning more than 70% of American households, have $467 of breathing room each month. About $15 per day of true margin for a family of 3. Someone is working 50-hour weeks, managing corporate stress, juggling schedules, and sacrificing time with their daughter to net $15 daily in financial flexibility. Every car repair becomes a crisis. Every medical surprise threatens their stability. Every rent or daycare increase forces impossible choices. This is why 6 figures feels like poverty. It's not that Emily and Chris are bad with money. It's that the system has priced middle-class life to consume exactly what middle-class people earn, leaving just enough margin to keep them functional, but not enough to ever feel secure. And here's the psychological trap that keeps smart people locked in this system. Because Emily sees $104,000 on her offer letter and Chris sees $58,000 on his teaching contract, they feel like they should be wealthy. They make decisions based on those big numbers at the top of their pay stubs, not the terrifyingly small number left over after fixed expenses. The mortgage broker looks at their combined gross income and smiles. The car dealership finance manager sees their credit scores and annual earnings and says, absolutely, you qualify for this payment. The bank approves them for financial obligations, assuming they'll never get sick, never lose a job, never face an emergency, never want to change careers, and never need to help aging parents. Society reinforces this illusion. Their parents, who bought their first home for $60,000 in 1982, pressure them to buy before you're priced out forever. Friends post closing day photos and vacation selfies that make staying within a conservative budget feel like failure. This is where the trap snaps shut. What psychologists call anchoring bias means that first big number, your gross salary, heavily influences every subsequent financial decision. When your brain is anchored on we make six figures, a $600 car payment doesn't feel dangerous. After all, you're not poor. You're successful professionals making good money. Layer on what researchers call lifestyle creep combined with social pressure. Your peer group is buying homes, having kids, taking family vacations, upgrading cars. You're not trying to show off. You're just trying not to fall visibly behind the standard of living that your income supposedly supports. But here's the crucial difference between Emily's generation and her parents. Her parents had built-in slack. When something went wrong, her mother could take a part-time job or her father could work overtime. They had backup plans and flexibility. Emily and Chris have already deployed both incomes at maximum capacity just to maintain baseline middle-class life. There's no hidden second gear. Every surprise expense, every industry downturn, every life change lands directly on their nervous system because they have no financial cushion to absorb impact. You're not paranoid for feeling constantly on edge about money. You're responding rationally to a financial structure that's designed to keep you productive and compliant by maintaining just enough pressure to prevent you from ever feeling truly secure. So what is the solution? Now you might be thinking this is hopeless. I'm trapped forever. There's no way out of this system without living in a van. That's exactly the mental trap the system relies on. It wants you to believe the only choices are playing their expensive game or opting out of adult life entirely. But here's the mindset shift that changes everything. The goal isn't maximizing income or status. It's maximizing margin, not square footage, not horsepower, not private school rankings. Margin, the space between what you earn and what you absolutely must spend to keep your life functional. The alternative approach is what I call the margin-first strategy. Instead of asking what can I get approved for or what do people at my income level typically buy, you ask what lifestyle keeps at least 25 to 30% of my take-home pay completely unspoken for. You flip the normal process entirely. Most people pick the house, the cars, the daycare, and then try to make their budget fit. The margin-first strategy decides in advance I will protect at least one out of every $3 I bring home as untouchable breathing room. Then you force every other expense to fit within the remaining 2/3. Let me make this concrete. If Emily and Chris bring home $9,000 monthly, traditional thinking says we can afford a $3,000 mortgage because that's 33% of gross income. The margin-first strategy says, if we protect $3,000 monthly as sacred margin, can we build a life on the remaining $6,000? That might mean buying a house for $350,000 instead of $489,000. It might mean one modest used car instead of 2 car payments. It might mean finding a nanny share for childcare instead of the premium daycare center. It might mean renting for 3 more years while friends buy homes. This requires sacrifice. You live below your approved borrowing capacity. You drive cars that don't match your professional image. You make choices that feel socially awkward in your peer group. But within 3 to 5 years of protecting that margin, you've quietly built a $60,000 to $100,000 fortress of cash and investments. You're not just buying monthly expenses. You're buying power. The power to quit a toxic job, survive a layoff, move for opportunity, or say no to financial pressure without your entire life collapsing. I want to leave you with one final thought. This entire conversation about why 6 figures feels broke isn't really about salary numbers or budgeting techniques. It's about power. It's about who has the luxury of making mistakes, changing their mind, walking away from bad situations, and who doesn't. Our parents' generation had something we traded away without realizing it: structural flexibility. They had smaller houses with lower payments, fewer fixed obligations, and the option for one parent to adjust their work schedule when life demanded it. They had margin built into their lifestyle by default. We traded that flexibility for material upgrades and social positioning. Bigger houses with granite countertops, 2 late model cars in the driveway, premium daycare that looks like a luxury resort, college degrees with price tags that don't match their economic value, and a constant pressure to maintain appearances that drain every dollar we earn. But here's what gives me hope. The granite countertops aren't the real goal. The goal is freedom. The feeling that if your industry implodes, or your boss becomes unbearable, or your landlord decides to sell, your life adjusts but doesn't shatter. You can optimize your way out of many problems, but you cannot optimize your way out of traps you don't know you're in. Now you know about the high-income poverty trap. You understand why your 6-figure salary feels like sophisticated broke. You see how the system is designed to price middle-class life at exactly what middle-class people earn, leaving just enough margin to keep you functional, but never enough to feel secure. The system isn't going to apologize or lower its prices because you're stressed. But you can quietly, deliberately start playing a different game. One where you optimize for margin first, status second, if at all. If this video made you feel less alone in your financial anxiety or helped you understand why that impressive salary doesn't feel impressive in your bank account, make sure to hit subscribe and drop a comment telling me where you're feeling the squeeze most: housing, childcare, healthcare, or something else entirely. Thanks for watching. Protect your margin, and I'll see you in the next one.